I'm director of academic innovation. Let me go back for them. Now it's recording, and there you go, everybody, on the recording. There's the link to the Padlet with all the resources. All right, there you go. So I'm Joe Marquez. I'm Director of Academic Innovation for CUE. I was an 8th grade science teacher for 10 years in Clovis, California, and then I became their educational technology coach for their secondary. And then I am now working for CUE, the organization that really changed my life and really pushed me to be a better educator. And I know Andrea also knows that because she's been a passionate member of CUE for quite a while. And just shameless plugs, we do have our fall conference coming up in about 1 week. But you guys are all in Southern California. This is in Northern. So you're probably waiting for Spring CUE. So that Spring CUE is probably the one that you're want to go to. That's March 21st to 23rd. That is in beautiful Palm Springs, and it's an amazing conference. And just so you know, CUE members get access to all of the PD that I do for free. We do workshops, we do Google boot camps, we do things called catalysts. It's all-day events for singular topics that meet your needs, and they're all free. And if you're not a CUE member, it's $20 or $79, depending on the event. So it's really great to be a CUE member. All right, before we get started, we have to take a moment and understand the moment we are living in. We are living in a moment of change that is absolutely groundbreaking, and it's happening right in front of our eyes. We are going to look back and realize, how did we get through life without these tools? And know that we're living in that moment where we're learning how to use them. We're also living in a moment where educators are either chomping at the bit to learn, or running to the closet and locking the door, and they don't even want to admit that they exist. But our students are using them, whether we want them to or not. So we have to acknowledge what they are and put forward a framework of proper use so that they aren't abusing these tools. And so we could talk a little bit about that as well. But we call this a Promethean moment. A Promethean moment is a moment in history where something is created or discovered that changes not one way we do things, but everything in which we do things. There's been lots of Promethean moments throughout history, but the most recent that we also lived through was the internet. The internet absolutely transformed the way that we do work, we do business, we do school, we do research, we do everything. But the problem with that analogy of talking about that and this is that the internet took a very long time to take hold. It was invented in the 80s, right? We had to dial up the internet in the 90s. When you talk to a student and tell them you had to call the internet and occasionally you were put on hold, they have no idea what you're talking about. Okay. And it really started to explode in the early 2000s on college campuses. I blame Napster for that. And then finally, when E-rate came into play and schools were able to shore up their infrastructure and devices started to come down in price, we started to see the move of from computer labs to rolling carts to one-to-one programs. And now devices are pretty common in the hands of students. I'm not saying one-to-one is everywhere, but it's much more common than it used to be. But think about how long that took, right? That took like 35 years from beginning to now. This generative AI, it's been around for a while. If you remember the generative tool that did chess, the AI that beat the grandmaster in the early 90s. That was one of them. And then we had one of the newer AIs about 2012 called the AI Go platform, which is a game. It's very popular overseas, much more complicated than chess. There's an AI platform that was able to beat the best Go players by inventing moves. It was the first time an AI was able to invent something beyond its programming. Then in 2016, Google created something called an LLM based on deep learning. That's called a large language model. Basically feeding it as much information as possible and seeing what it would do with it. And that evolved into the tools that we have today. And on November 29th, 2022, less than a year ago, ChatGPT was the first to go to market with the publicly available generative AI tool. And the rest is history. And it is the fastest growing tool, the fastest growing technology to take over basically the world in such a short amount of time. That is the world we are living in right now. It is absolutely groundbreaking and amazing. But we have to say this. We have a choice. We can either live with disruption or live with discovery. The difference is this. Disruption is when something sneaks up on you where you don't have a plan and you have to pivot in real time because you weren't ready for it. That is disruption. You don't have to be disrupted if you learn how to utilize these tools now. We would call that discovery, when we turn to the unknown and go towards it to discover how to live with it, how to deal with it, how to tame it. And so you are all discoverers in your learning by coming here tonight and by utilizing these tools. We need more educators to be discoverers of how to utilize these ethically and efficiently and through engagement in our classroom with our students. And we have to make sure that we're using the term generative AI. We can't use ChatGPT. That is one tool in a pantheon of other tools. So the tools that we're going to talk about today are generative AI text generators. If we have time, I'm going to show you some free, cool image generators. But we're mainly going to talk about the text generators. And the text generators we're going to talk about are ChatGPT, Bard, and Claude. Those are the three that we're going to talk about. You'll have links to all of them, no worries. And I'm going to show you the differences between each one so you don't have to worry about that. But before we learn about any of these things, we have to know how these things work, right? It's think of it as a coin slot, right? This is off to the left. This is an actual diagram out of the 2016 paper that Google published. And basically what they said is this: they built a digitally living neural network. It is based upon the neurons in our brain. And every neuron that it hits creates a link to a pattern. That pattern creates a word, and it then finds the word that's most likely to come next based upon the prompt you put in. It's basically predictive text on steroids. And so basically you put in a prompt. Something happens in the middle, and then you get an output, and that is your generated response, whether it's text or an image or voice or music now. Here's the thing. All of the engineers can explain how they built the large language model, but nobody can explain what is actually happening in the middle. These tools are doing things even the inventors couldn't even dream of, and they are getting smarter every time we ask a question. They are going beyond their programming. So it's pretty amazing. When people don't understand that, I just go to Plinko. It's like you take a Plinko chip and it drops in and it bounces back and forth, and then it lands in an output. You could put that Plinko chip in the exact same spot, and based on where it hits, it's going to come and land somewhere else. You cannot predict where it's going to land, just as you cannot predict the output. In fact, you can give your students the exact same prompt, all of them. They put it into the machine, and they will all receive unique responses. They will not be identical. They might be similar because it's looking for the same kind of answers, but they will all be unique. And so you wouldn't be able to say, wait a minute, you copied off that person. They will all be different, which is very, very interesting. Now, when I explain this to students, because I do drop-ins to classrooms and I try to explain to students what these are, I explain Plinko. They have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't watch The Price is Right. Right? So I have to do a different analogy, and this is the analogy I give them. This image is generative AI. And you might be going, wait a minute, that's not generative AI. That's Richard Donner's Superman from 1977. Well, this is generative AI because this gentleman right over here, that's Superman's father, but he's dead. He doesn't exist. Superman is an alien from the planet Krypton. Okay. And he was placed into a super crib and shot to Earth to be saved. But what his father did before that is exactly what the engineers have done with generative AI. They took a platform, which was a crystal, and filled it with information that other people created. Music, history, books, art, autobiographies, every history, every paper, everything from the planet Krypton was placed into this crystal, plus the entire history of Superman's family and all of the diaries of Superman's dad. And when Superman became of age, the Fortress of Solitude was created and his father appeared. That's not his father. That is a generative representation of him. Superman asks a question. That's a prompt. It goes through the crystal and a response is given in the form of his father. A brand new response, a unique response, not a pre-recorded response. That is generative AI in a nutshell. But instead of a crystal, we have LLMs. And instead of the history of Krypton, we have data sets that big companies program themselves. Okay? Every different LLM, so Bard, ChatGPT, Claude, they all use a different data set crafted by their companies. That's why each one responds a little bit differently to our prompts. But that is generative AI. And that may seem far away, but there are actual companies promising families they can do this to their relatives. There's a company called Rememory that says if you give us all the information about your family, your history, your lineage, diaries of your family, when a family member passes away, you can ask them questions and they will respond. Now, that sounds a little bit morbid, but I tell you this, I would give anything to be able to talk to my grandfather again. So imagine if I was able to do that and be able to speak, even if it was a digital twin of my grandfather, I can still get an essence of him in some way. Imagine if gravestones had a QR code you scanned and you can actually talk to the person. Again, a little bit morbid, but it makes it a little bit more beautiful instead of just saying, I wonder how that person's life was. And now with the advent of the internet and YouTube and podcasts and things like this, imagine how much more data we're giving these companies to do this. I mean, there's enough data on me for somebody to create a digital twin of me. Now, you probably don't want to do that. One Joe is enough, but it's possible now as we go through this. But imagine for history class, imagine for science class, imagine for AP literature. And you can ask an author, you can ask a historical figure, you can ask a scientist in real time, what was his motivations? Why did you start the American Revolution? Why were you part of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin? J.J. Thomson, what made you want to understand the inner workings of the atom? These are things that we could do in class, and it's feasible as long as we have enough data to create the data sets on these individuals. In fact, there's a prompt that I'm going to share with you where you can talk to Benjamin Franklin. There is enough autobiographies about him. Well, not auto, he didn't make it himself. But biographies about Benjamin Franklin. There's enough papers written by Benjamin Franklin. There's enough historical context about him for us to be able to speak to a generative Benjamin Franklin. So I'll show you how you can do that today. But one thing we definitely have to understand, okay, the data that these companies are providing in the data sets are created by other humans that didn't necessarily give their permission to be put in the data sets. They gave their permission to be indexed on the internet. That is how Google actually has a Google search, is by indexing. But indexing is also the way that you can pull that information and create data sets. So there's a lot of legal battles happening right now. But we also have to understand that the data they're pulling from are written by humans. Humans are inherently biased. And so you can occasionally receive biased information from these things, sexist information from these things, and racist information from these things. So these companies have promised to scrub their data sets of any biases or racisms or sexisms that they can find in it. But they say to us, trust us, because they will not let us see what data they're putting in. Number one, it's probably because they want to avoid lawsuits. That's probably number one. But number two, they call that their proprietary information. That's what sets apart their tool from everybody else's. So there's a lot of legal battles happening right now. And also, we don't know what they're doing with the information that we are giving them. So I want to tell you right now, please do not put any identifiable student information into any of your prompts. Always say the student instead of the student's name. Okay. And then also, if you're trying to do some research, or you're trying to do some stuff with your school or district work, don't put any non-public information from your school district into these either. I don't know what they're doing with them. There hasn't been any kind of data breaches. Even if somebody breached the data set, it's not things that we can read. It's only things the computers can read, but we still don't want to do that. That is right now why you don't see a huge influx of LMSs implementing generative AI tools just yet. They don't know how to crack the student privacy just yet. But that is really, I would say, by the start of 2024 school year, 2024, 2025, whether you have Canvas or Schoology or Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams, there will be generative AI in there to help differentiate instruction, and if you connect it with your school's a special education department, be able to identify IEPs for modifications and accommodations to meet the needs of all students in real time. It's going to be pretty amazing, but we have to make sure we protect student privacy to begin with. So before we dive in, I want to open the floor up really quick for any questions anybody may have on stuff we've talked about thus far. I just wanted to give you a baseline understanding of what these tools are before we see the magic happen. And remember, if you want to ask the question in the chat, feel free. If you want to unmute yourself and ask that question, that way you can do that as well.
I just put in the chat that StoryFile lets you interview people that, that are currently living or recently passed, like Holocaust survivors. And
yeah, that's NPR. Is it NPR that does that?
I don't know who runs it.
I have to look. I've heard a couple of people talk about it. I've been interested in taking a look at it.
It's pretty cool. I did the William Shatner one. And
cool.
He was creepily accurate in his responses to my questions.
I love it. Marcus, I see your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself, my friend. Oh, you're still muted.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I joined a little bit late, sorry, but I think it's kind of dangerous to, just as a first reaction, to say that actually you interview Benjamin Franklin. You're actually interviewing an LMS, a system, and that person is the data set that actually is given, and which interpretation. The person is dead. We will never know what the person will really answer, and that's not, quote unquote, the truth. So maybe the truth does not exist, but that's fine. That was
and if you ask these tools to be Benjamin Franklin, it will actually respond back, I cannot do that. Benjamin Franklin is no longer existing.
Correct. Yeah.
So the way that you write it is, I would like you to role play being Benjamin Franklin.
So that was just a personal. And no, I guess other things are going to come up. I thought ChatGPT actually they gave their data set. Of course, they don't give the data set itself, but I thought they put in it that X amount came from Wikipedia and things like that, X amount from Reddit, X amount from different sources. I think they actually named the data sets they get it from, and also that it's limited to 2021, I believe.
Yes, the last information we have is actually from ChatGPT 3, from 2020. They did not release their data set that they added more to for 3.5. And then their most recent updates, they have not told us where they've gotten it either. So you're absolutely right. From 2020, we have that 60% of their data comes from the Common Crawl, which is a nonprofit organization that scrapes the internet. And then 22% comes from web text, which is Reddit. That is anything with 3 upvotes is brought in, not for factual information. It's to identify how humans converse with one another. That's how they use that. Then books 1 and 2 are a repository of e-published books, so they can identify different genres and how different writers, their styles. And then finally, a little bit of Wikipedia, because everybody needs a little Wikipedia, I guess. It's like sea salt on your steak when it's done cooking. But so that's why I put this in, because that is the last bit of data we have from these companies of where they're grabbing their things from, which again, they call it their proprietary information, which is understandable, but mainly I think it's because of all these lawsuits. They don't want to give away all that stuff either. So thank you, Marcus. I appreciate that. Mr. Tapa.
Yeah, hi. Say, I just had a question about that whole hidden layer thing. I definitely follow the Plinko analogy. Can you speak at all? It's like, engineers make things and usually they kind of know what they're making. I just never quite understood that whole hidden layer. I mean, can you say a little bit more about it, Joe? Or
yeah, so they built it in the style of our neural network in our brain, and just like we have an idea of how our brain works. We don't truly understand how it actually works and stores information and things like that. We have an idea. And it's the same thing here. It's because of all the different nodes that they have in these tools, and the tools themselves, they're not looking at words, they're looking at patterns. And one of the ways I try to explain it is based upon that movie, The Arrival, in 2016, when aliens came to Earth and they don't speak a language, they speak in symbology. And they had to figure out how these aliens are speaking because they're speaking in symbols and patterns. That's kind of how these tools work. What your prompt kind of lights up a pattern and it scrolls through the data set trying to identify areas that meet that pattern. And then basically, just like predictive text, it identifies this word should be, and then the most likely word is this next word, and then this one, it just happens at a super rapid rate. So these tools have been slowly embedded into the things we use every day, but this is something that is much bigger, much faster. And again, just like I was saying, it's doing things that even the inventors hadn't thought that it could do. It's like the start of every single disaster movie about humans inventing AI and it overtakes us, which is why you'll hear me always say please at the end of your prompt, just in case the AI overlords do overtake us. They know that we were very nice to it at the beginning.
hey, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And there actually is a few data scientists out there that they're running some experiments to try and identify, once their prompt goes in, where it's lighting up and how it's lighting up to see what kind of patterns it is doing. But you're absolutely right. It's flabbergasting to us to think that these people invented something that they don't know the inner workings of. But that's what we do. So the tools that we're going to talk about today are Bard, ChatGPT, and Claude. So I just want to real quickly show them to you. I'm not going to really go through too much because we only have a half hour left. So Bard is Google's generative AI tool. And that is found at bard.google.com. Depending on your school district, sometimes it is unblocked, sometimes it is blocked. So I always recommend trying to use these tools with your personal Gmail because it's always unblocked and for you to try. One of the things I like about Bard is one of their recent updates 2 weeks ago, and that is a self-test. So these tools have a tendency to what we call hallucinate. And that is a term that we use for make things up. They just make up an answer and it's not true. And it's more common when you have a very short, a vague prompt. So what Google has done is after it generates a response, you can ask it to fact check itself off of the internet. So I want to show you what that looks like. So I say, please tell me the difference between whales and dolphins. Okay. This is a very superficial prompt. I'm not showing you a great prompt. This is very superficial, but for our purposes, I'm just going to ask this question. So Bard is doing its thing. Bard is completely up to date as far as I know. They're constantly updating their data set because it's Google. They basically own the internet and they have access to all that data right off the bat. And notice it comes in here. It says, hey, the difference is in size, body shape, diet, teeth, social structure. It even creates a table. And if you wanted to, you can export it to Google Sheets. And now you have a Google Sheet table right there. But one of the things I like right here is double check this response. So you click on it and Google is taking its generative response and fact checking it against different websites on the internet. Now, I do want you to know, just because it's found on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Okay. So even if it says it did find it on the internet, you still want to double check to make sure it's accurate. But you see anything in green, it found corroborating evidence on the internet that it has been found. And so if I click on it, it could take me right to Whale Facts. And if I scroll in Whale Facts, it should highlight where it found that. I don't know why it's not doing it right here. Of course, because I'm showcasing it, it's not there, but it should highlight where it found that information. But notice over here where it's peach, it says, I found differing information on this. So you might want to double check this. Again, this is not an end all be all. This isn't something you tell students anything green is true. They still want to double check and fact check. This is not meant to be their research. It is meant to give them a starting point in their research. Yes, Marcus.
Yes, sorry. Can you ask them, I had a hard time with ChatGPT, but can you ask them to give you citations or references?
In ChatGPT, you can ask it a follow-up question on please defend your answer with citations, and they will bring up some citations. But again, even that is prone to hallucinations. So even if you click on it, it may take you to a 404 page saying this page doesn't exist. So you also want to double check those things.
There was that case, I guess, of the lawyers in Texas where they were just yeah. Okay,
I love that story because he's like, I had ChatGPT write my brief. I didn't know it would lie. That's a fantastic story. So Bard, I like Bard for research and planning. In fact, I'm going to show you really quickly. This is my personal one, just so you can see what it has under personal. If you come up to the top under your personal Bard account, you can actually link it to other Google services like Google Flights, Google Hotels, Google Maps, even your entire Google Workspace, so that it'll start, it can write you an email and you say, okay, send this email to this person, and it will open up your email and send what it just created. It's pretty amazing what it's doing. It's still at its infancy. It's not 100% perfect, but you can kind of see where Google is going. They are integrating this into all of their products, just like Microsoft is. And so you could say right now, well, students can't use ChatGPT. It's 18 or over, or students can't use Bard, or students can't use Claude. At the moment, that may be the case, but it will be the case that these things will be available to them. Look at Google Docs. I'm in the beta program of Google's experiments, and Google Docs has a help me write this. This is Bard built right into Google Docs right away. The internet, you may see this. Again, I'm in the experimental mode in Google. I don't know if this is available to everybody yet, but Google now produces a generative summary of any Google search first, and then it will give you the websites down at the bottom. And so it's almost giving you a summary of the best information from the websites that you would normally go to. And then what about when you do go to a web page? What if you like, this is a lot. I don't want to read this whole thing. I wish I can just get it summarized. There's a new Google button that says, generate me key points from this web page. I click on it, and it does the generative search, and it then just gives me 3 bullet points of the most important things from this web page. And if I click on it, it will take me right to that part of the web page. I can read more about it. So it's trying to make things more efficient for you to find things faster and more quickly all the way through. Again, it's the very beginning of these things. So don't expect the world for them to be 100% accurate. But again, it's an idea or a roadmap of where these companies are going. Walter, do you have your hand up? Oh, Marcus. Sorry, Marcus, do you have your hand up? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, when you mentioned before the emails, do your emails then become part of the data set?
So thank you for asking that. So when you opt into this, they are saying no. All of this information stays in your account. It is not included in the data set. They use it to form the generative response, and then they wipe it out for that future use. So, and you can read all about it underneath the Bard Privacy Help Hub. That will explain to you how they use it and how they ensure it does not get added to the data set. And again, I think this is trying to be proof of concept for businesses to buy in and for school sites to buy in to share, to save privacy. ChatGPT, notice it's a little bit different. You still have your chats or your new chats off to the left-hand side. Your ChatGPT might be a little bit different than mine because I have an extension called Prompt Genius, which saves my favorite prompts. It's almost like a built-in clipboard. So I don't have to have just like a lot of people have like a Google Doc of their favorite prompts and they copy and paste them over. I have them right into my Chat GPT. It's free. It doesn't cost any money. But it just saves a lot of time when I'm doing presentations. The free version at the moment is limited to information up to September of 2021. But the pay version now has Bing integration, Microsoft Bing integration. And it is with that, when you click on that, it is now completely up to date with the internet's information. But that's for the pay version. Also, the pay version has integration of Dolly 3, which is a fantastic image generator. It'll make images of anything you ever wanted. My daughter wanted a unicorn with a mane of donuts instead of hair, and it made that for her. Pretty cool. I recommend using ChatGPT for linguistical outputs, meaning if you want it to sound very humanistic, so creative writing, essays, articles, emails with a softer tone, that's what I would utilize ChatGPT for. And then finally, one of the new kids on the block, Claude. Claude calls themselves the ethical AI because in their mission statement, they say that they're following something they call constitutional AI, where they are only bringing in information to the data set that is non-biased, non-sexist, not racist, that they're scrubbing all the stuff we're asking them to scrub. But again, we don't know if that's true or not because they won't share their data set, but they are promising that's what they're doing. But one of the cool reasons I like Claude is because in the free version, you can upload CSV files, which are a different kind of Excel and a different kind of Google Sheet download, or PDFs. So if you're a teacher, right? So I'm going to go to my documents. Desktop, sorry. I have a PDF of The Outsiders. Oh, and it also promises not to add whatever you add to it into its data set. Right. So if I add this Outsiders book, it's not going to then absorb the Outsiders book into its data set. And so what I do with this is I can actually ask it to lower the Lexile level of chapter 1. So if I have students that don't read at that 8th grade level, because that's usually where or 7th grade, that's usually where Outsiders is read, you can ask to lower it to a 4th grade Lexile level and hand that chapter to the student. So it's a little bit easier for them to read, but they still get the information. So that's why I like Claude, because you can upload those PDFs as well. All right, so let's move forward with these tools. We're going to do a quick activity. Okay. And this is to teach you what you need to do to prompt. So this is what I would like you to do. And this is based upon this gentleman, Amar. He found that prompting ChatGPT to write a children's book worked really well. So he gave it an idea that was percolating in his mind for a while about a child who befriended a robot. And he asked ChatGPT to write a children's story. He then took that story and put bits and pieces of it as prompts into an image generator called Midjourney. And in just 48 hours, he had a book and images. He then took the text and the images, and he went to Amazon's digital Kindle bookstore and created a digital book. And he called it Alice and Sparkle. And then in that digital bookstore, you have the option to print the book as well. And so you see him holding 3 copies of the book that ChatGPT helped him write or wrote for him, right? And that it only took 72 hours from conception to having that in his hand. Pretty amazing, the turnover. And so I thought it would be cool to write a story for my daughters. I have a 7-year-old girl and a 4-year-old girl, and we've read through all the books that we have at home, and we have hundreds. And so I wanted to write an original story, or I wanted ChatGPT to do it. And I thought about that movie Elf. And in that movie Elf, somebody had an idea about writing a children's book about a tribe of asparagus children who were ashamed of the way their pee smelled. I thought that could be a hilarious children's book. So I went into ChatGPT and said, I want you to write a children's book about a farm. And on this farm are newly sprouted vegetables, all vegetable children, one of them being an asparagus. And he's constantly teased about the way his pee smells. And I said, please fill in the middle. I don't know what happens, but he goes off on a journey. Somebody tells him to believe in himself and that your weaknesses are your strength. He ends up coming back to the farm, and I want pests to be destroying the farm. And the only thing that stops the pest is the smell of asparagus pee. And he saves the farm, and he's hailed a hero. So that's what I told ChatGPT to write. I didn't have the middle, but I had the beginning and the end, and it wrote it. And so if you ever want to see it, it's right there in a Google Doc called Andy Asparagus, You're in Trouble. And my daughters loved it. And it took barely any time to write it. So you're going to do this right now. You're going to go to one of your favorite tools that I just shared with you. For these, it's linguistical writing, so I do recommend ChatGPT, but you can definitely use Bard or Claude as well. But this is your onus to write a children's book. You're going to get 5 minutes. I know it's fast. Think about a child in your life. It could be a child in your past, in your present. It can be a past student, a current student, a future student that you make up. It can be a son, daughter. It can be a niece, nephew, a grandson, a granddaughter. Think about a child that is struggling, maybe struggling with bullying, or maybe they have a speech impediment. Maybe they have a learning disability. Maybe they have a physical disability. Maybe they have a skill like bottle flipping that they're geniuses at, but everybody thinks it's weird. Something. And I want you to have it write a children's book. But what you're going to do is you're going to utilize this prompt blueprint. This prompt blueprint helps guide you in writing prompts to ensure you have these things. These top 3 I find to be the most important. Okay. So the task or the ask, what do you want it to do? So you're going to ask it to write you a children's book. Then you're going to give it the context. The context is where your creativity and your brain dump happens, right? What's the child's name? How old is the child? What's the gender of the child? What is their struggle? How do you want the story to unfold? Do you have a beginning, but not an end? Do you have a beginning and an end, but not the middle? Do a brain dump of everything you could possibly think about. What is the season this is taking place? Where in the world is this taking place? Because it's going to scour the data set to bring all the information to make your brain dump a reality. And then finally, the end is your exemplars or your examples, meaning how do you want this written? Do you want it written by paragraphs? Do you want it written by pages? Do you want it written by sentences? Do you want it in the style of, right? Do you want it in the style of Shel Silverstein? Do you want it in the style of Mo Brooks? Do you want it in the style of Dr. Seuss? You want to give some examples of how you want it written. That's the exemplars. Okay, so those are the three things you're going to do. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. So we're going to have until 4:20. So you're going to find your favorite generative tool. You're going to write your prompt and you're going to hit submit. And you're going to read it. And we're going to see how you thought it came out. Let's see. Yes, Marcus.
I'm sorry again. Very quickly, do you actually use it in bullet points, or is it just in a paragraph, or do you see that makes a difference?
So I do bullet points when I'm looking for summaries. So I definitely say in a bullet point format, please summarize this article for me. So I do utilize bullet points. You can use tables as well. Like if you're asking it to write a rubric for you, you can ask it to put it in a tableized format. And in column 1, I want this, column 2, I want this. As detailed as you are, it will do its best to make your thought a reality. Four minutes. 4 minutes. It's a quick exercise. And just for giggles, I'm going to put my Andy Asparagus link in the chat in case you want to read that. You don't have to go searching through the slide deck.
Thank you.
Two minutes left. And if you are done with your book and it's written, I want you to do in the chat, you're going to do a 0 to 5. If I was doing this in person, I would be doing a fist of 5. So 0 would mean this is the worst story I've ever read. I am now a worse human being for having read it. And 5 would be, this is absolutely amazing. I can't believe in under 5 minutes, this story now exists, right? So in the chat, please put a number between 0 and 5 on how you think your story came out. Marcus wants to throw his computer against the wall so that story never exists again. So Marcus is the toughest book reviewer in the world, and the rest of you are the easiest. So the reason I start with children's stories is because it's not that high of a bar in this day and age. I mean, again, I read my daughters a lot of books, and some of the books I'm like, this actually went through a review process to be published. And somebody said, yes, publish this book. And it is not good at all. Right. And so to be able to see a machine that in under 5 minutes took your idea and crafted something new, right? I'm not going to say original because themes are not original. Themes are repetitive that happen all the time in books, but at least it's a brand new story that was written. A lot of us are saying 5s. I would be a little bit tougher. I would definitely say on first attempts, it should be about a 2 or a 3 because we always want to do follow-ups. We always want, there's always parts of the story that, you know what, I don't quite like the middle. I need you to change this. So the reason I love starting like this is because I want you to imagine that this book was written by an author that you hired and you paid this person $1,000 to write this book. Now, for $1,000, you're going to be a little bit harder critiquing it, right? And so if they gave you the first draft and you're like, I just can't, I can't say yes to this. I paid you $1,000. I need you to go back and revise these things. And you just go red ink on it and you ask it to revise it and you give them the notes and they go, okay, I'll go back and I'll make these changes. That's what these tools do. But you don't pay for it and you don't have to feel bad because it'll make the changes instantly. And you constantly do follow-up prompts until the book is, I would say, 80 to 90% satisfactory for you. And then you go in and add your own stuff to it to make it your own. Okay. But understand the one thing here. You can publish this book all you want. You can sell this book all you want. You cannot copyright this book. Anything generated by AI is uncopyrightable in the US Copyright Office. Any image generated by AI is uncopyrighted. You can't copyright that based upon the Copyright Office. The only thing you could do is arrange the text and images in the fashion that you want. That's called human interaction. So you could publish the book arranged in a very particular way and copyright the arrangement, but you can't copyright the story or the images themselves. And that was based off of a ruling from Zara, the warrior princess, that tried to get copyrighted back in February using AI tools. So we need to be able to understand that. You can sell all you want, you can publish all you want, but other people can just take your idea and do it as well. And you could not sue them because you can't copyright story or images. So I like that because it made you think a little bit. Here's the other things that are part of a blueprint, the other ones, right? We did the task or the ask, right? The context is everything you add and ask about in the middle. Then we did our exemplars. The next thing you could do is persona or role play, right? That means like in the voice of, and then you put somebody's style, or role play as an expert marketer, role play as J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Again, these tools are very literal. If you tell it, become Benjamin Franklin, it will tell you, I cannot become Benjamin Franklin. I am only a chatbot. But if you say, please role play as Benjamin Franklin, it'll be like, oh, yes, I will. I will pretend to be Benjamin Franklin, right? It is very literal, like Drax from the Guardians of the Galaxy. Very literal. Very literal. The next is your format or output preference. How do you want it to look? Do you want it bullet pointed? Do you want it in paragraph format? Do you want it double spaced? Do you want it in a table? Do you want it exportable as a document? How do you want it? And then finally, tone or style, meaning I want it in the style of a third grader. I want it in the style of a college graduate or a college student at a graduate level university. I want it written in academic language. What is the tone or style? When I write emails to parents, it's please make sure the tone is light, but important, right? Because I don't want it to be too stern, but I want it to make sure that it sounds important. What kind of tone do you want it to write as? That's what these are all about. So as our time is coming to an end, how are teachers currently utilizing these tools? They're using it to help them. And I want you to understand the term here is help them, not completely write lesson plans for them. It'll help them engineer lesson plans for them that are standards aligned, that are IEP aligned, that are framework aligned. Whatever you add to the exemplar, the examples, and the context, it'll align it to all that information. For example, teachers may not want it to write lesson plans, but they may want to find out. I have a student with visual impairments. How can I modify this lesson plan to meet their needs? You upload your lesson plan, and you say, I have a student who is visually impaired. They are near blindness. But they can see a little bit of light. They have great hearing and great tactile responses. Is there any modifications or accommodations that you can add to this lesson plan to meet their needs? And it will do it for you. And it'll give you a whole bunch of different examples based upon your lesson plan where you can add in those modifications and accommodations for those students. It is fantastic at crafting writing prompts, right? So if you have a novel that you're having your students read and you want some, beginning of the day kind of writing prompts, maybe connecting the novel to the current events, you can say in chapter 1 of this novel, this was the main theme. Can you connect it to any current events that are happening right now? And then craft a writing prompt for my 11th grade students. And it will give you a few examples of maybe some writing prompts that you can begin with. Again, it's not always going to hit a home run, but it might start creating some creative juices for you. It'll raise or lower the lexile level of any article that you give it. And it will help you write IEPs. It'll help you write letters of recommendation for any student, and it does it really well. I would throw away all my letters of recommendation that I wrote and let it do this for me all day long. It is fantastic. And then definitely social media posts and email templates to talking with parents. So let me show you some examples. So I'm going to show you here an 8th grade science lesson plan. Okay. And so this is what this lesson plan states. Write a lesson plan. That's the ask. Write a lesson plan for 8th grade science. That is one context. Because if all I said is write a lesson plan on cell division, on mitosis and meiosis, it doesn't have any context. It'll just write something and I'm like, this is not going to work. Well, yeah, because it doesn't know what grade level you want it to be written for. It doesn't know how long your classes are. It doesn't know how many times a week you meet. You need to add in as much information about your class as possible. An exemplar. Maybe you want to upload a previous lesson plan because that's kind of the flow you're looking for. And you can say, after this post, I'm going to give you one of my previous lesson plans. I want you to follow the cadence of that lesson plan and craft me a new one. Now you're giving that exemplar. So write a lesson plan for 8th grade science. They are going to research context, identify the function of organelles of the cell. They're going to write a script. They're going to produce a video. Please include all next generation science standards. There's so much more context I can add, and there's so much context I am missing, right? But that's how you start these prompts. And so I can then come in here, and I'm going to kick off this prompt. And here we go. You can see that I have it linked, right? This is the pay version, right? I have it linked to the internet. So it's actually visiting NGSS, taking a look at all the current science standards and practicing how it's going to implement them. And so we have the objectives. right? 8th grade science. Here are the objectives. Here are the current next generation science standards aligned to the lesson. Here's the activities, the introduction, the research, the analogy, the script writing, the video production. Notice it's not breaking it up by day. I can then come down here and do a follow-up. Please break down the lesson for 3 days at 50 minutes each day. Boom. Follow up. I'm giving it more context. Day 1, introduction, wrap up, homework. Day 2, now it's breaking it up based upon the days and the time constraints that I'm asking it for, right? And again, there's so many different prompts in here, and that's why 60 minutes is never enough time. I mean, we're just getting our juices flowing to go through these. That's why I want you to know every prompt that is in here is in the Padlet. Scroll down to the, go to the left-hand side, scroll down three blocks, and there's a link that says prompt slide deck handout. That's where all the prompts are. You can copy and paste those in and see what it does. Erase science if you're an English teacher and put in for an English class studying this novel. Change it up, make it your own, and see how these things work. This right here is for Marcus, because I'm going to show you how the role play goes. Role play, history or fiction, right? You are now the top researcher and expert on Benjamin Franklin. By saying that, it narrows down the data set to only looking at facts and books and papers written about Benjamin Franklin by experts or primary sources, right? One of the founding fathers of the United States, because there might have been another Benjamin Franklin out there that it looks for. I wanted to identify it as that person. You have read every book, diary, speech, a post, letter written by him. You've read every biography and history account, recounting the life and times of Benjamin Franklin. From here on out, you as the expert will answer each question as if you are Benjamin Franklin. Do you understand? Right? It knows it is role-playing. It knows it is not Benjamin Franklin, but it's going to do its best. It's going to do its best to do that. And so that looks like this. Yes, I understand. While I am not Benjamin Franklin, nor a top researcher, I'll do my best to answer your questions in a manner that might reflect Benjamin Franklin's perspective and knowledge. So again, it is reminding you, this is not actually Benjamin Franklin speaking to you from beyond the grave through a ghost in the machine. Okay. It is me doing my best. So that's kind of how the prompts are for role playing. So our time is up. I'm going to answer Marcus's question. I'm going to stay back to answer any other questions anybody else may have, but I do want to respect your time. And we did say we'd be done by 4:30. So if now is your time to leave us, thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you want to stick around and ask questions, I will be here because I have another session I have to do at 5. So I'm going to be stuck at my computer till 7. So any questions you have, I'm right here. So Marcus,
yes, just quick,
shoot away.
Thank you. Just a quick one, because I have another Zoom. I have to go with some students. I think one of the ways of viewing it, doing it or using it with the students, because that's ultimately what I want to be in front with the students, is maybe generate this in 3 different ways and then have students compare the results.
Yes.
That way we can see that that's where that creativity is going to come, because
correct,
it's going to be hard to analyze this to know that it's not a chat GPT. But if we actually tell them to do it in chat GPT and then analyze or compare results, maybe that's more authentic with the
correct.
students.
I agree. And I recommend kind of the same thing as well when working with these different devices. Take the same prompt, put it in Bard, put it in ChatGPT, put it in Claude, and see which one gives you the best response, right? And students should be doing the same thing, because one tool may be better for one kind of prompt and another tool may be better for another one. You shouldn't be beholden to one tool just because that's the one you like most often. But I do like your idea of having students do a prompt battle Everybody finds it. Here's like the basics of how you prompt. Now I want everybody to write a Benjamin or a role-playing prompt, and let's see whose fake bot responds the best, right? And then analyze how did you write it, and let's see if we can mimic that in the class. So I think that's a great way to model that. Yes.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, Andrea, for doing this. I have to run. Sorry, guys. I would love
No
to
worries.
stay.
Thanks, Marcus. It's been a pleasure.
So this is an ongoing series. Every month we'll have a different guest. So if you can join us next month, we have Chris Bell from Edge Protocols, who's going to go over teacher tools. And I'm not sure December yet, but in January, our own superintendent, Jerry Almadaris, is going to be our guest. So tell your friends, sign up, because I think these are important conversations to have. So like Joe said, we're not running scared, right? We're proactive. And as I said last month, let your students know that they know. You know?
That's right. Bring it out of the shadows and into the open and let them know.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know.
Andrea, I didn't go to the one last month. Where are these held, the recordings held?
Actually, I did not. Hang on, let me